So tell me, has the frozen conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia become a hot conflict that is also turning into a regional geopolitical threat? Welcome to this special YouTube episode on Nagorno-Karabakh. When I was doing my LLM in alternative dispute resolution and later applied it in my track 2 negotiations in Europe and the Middle East, it was clear to me that there are 3 prerequisites for an exercise in conflict resolution to be successful. You need to have a hurting stalemate, in other words, the peak of the conflict. You have to have trust inter partes or between the parties, and you should also have pressure from international actors. However, according to a recent poll by an international NGO, young Azerbaijani and Armenian generations are increasingly more radicalized on both sides and are also more distrustful of their neighbors. Besides, the leaders of both warring countries, Aliyev on the one hand and Pashinyan on the other, have boxed themselves into maximalist positions. And as the legal maxim goes, it's easy to climb up the tree, it's far more difficult to come down the tree. We don't use ladders in law, we use trees. According also to many NGOs I collaborate with, humanitarian work, and particularly across the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave, are hugely limited to the ICRC, the Geneva-based Red Cross, and the UK-based Halo Trust. And then comes this question. Is this conflict one that has to choose between security and justice, between Armenian and Azerbaijani, or is it subjective and relative? And if so, who seeks justice and who seeks security? And can they be translated into public international law principles, which are often competing, of territorial integrity versus secession? What about self-determination? Again, contradictory examples. You have Palestinians and Kosovars on the one hand, and you have Croatians and Timorese on the other. At the start of this conflict, this war on the 27th of September last, I thought it would be a controlled escalation, but it has led to an explosion that attempts a takeover, Idlib style in terms of carpet bombing, with mutual recriminations. Listen to your radio, look at the TV, both sides are attacking each other. And the flouting, the breaking of truces, 2 choreographed by Lavrov in Moscow and 1 by Pompeo in Washington, DC. There are also mercenaries, that is verified, and minorities, particularly on the Azerbaijani side, who are also being sucked into the war. In all this melee, does self-determination begin where occupation ends? What happens to the refugees on both sides? There were Armenian refugees who left, and there were Azerbaijani refugees who left too. And is Turkey stirring the pot further by pitching in with all its military assistance, with its coercive diplomacy? What about Russia, for that matter, the big neighbor that looks at the Southern Caucasus as its near abroad? The 2009 Madrid Principles, which were restated in the 1993 United Nations Security Council resolution, referred to the return of 7 occupied regions. But is this now possible when there is no goodwill, no trust, and no good faith? What compromise solution adapted to conflict resolution can be applied by the OSCE Minsk group today? What support? What less meddlesome behavior? What gradual implementation? Those famous CBMs that we practitioners talk about, confidence building measures. And on top of all of that, you have COVID 19. Now, this in itself is a big ask. But I have with me on this YouTube episode Dr. Ibrahim Fraihat, Associate Professor at the Doha Institute in Qatar, who happens to be a lecturer on conflict resolution. More interestingly, he happens to have a case study on Nagorno-Karabakh. More interestingly, so people don't look at me and say, Harry, it's you stirring the pot. He's not Azerbaijani, he's not Armenian, he's not Turkish, he's French. You can find more about Dr. Fraihat and his wonderful book in the description box of my YouTube when you look at it. In the meantime, Dr. Fraihat, 9 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Harry. It's a pleasure to be with you and to have this conversation with a conflict resolution expert like yourself. And thank you for the excellent introduction and the framing of our conversation in order to be able to hopefully can contribute some constructive, positive thoughts about this conflict that can hopefully help in a better understanding of the opportunities for a solution of this conflict. I will begin my conversation, my talk, actually focusing on two major parts. The first one, which is about the management of the conflict, and the second is about the resolution of the conflict. So the assumption here, Harry, is that better managed conflicts are easier to resolve and are better positioned to be resolved because regulated, managed, well-managed conflicts, they help us to be able to manage them well and to drive them better into a resolution. So in order to ultimately achieve a resolution, we need to begin first with the better management of this conflict, because I do not think this conflict was managed well since it ended the last war in 1994. And under management, I suggest a number of ways to look at it. One is that we need to have a better regulation of the conflicts, especially during this time, during times of war, is that to recognize some certain regulations that prevent the harm of civilians and to have civilians avoid this war and no casualties on the civilian side. So the better we can instate such regulations to keep it limited, contained, and focused, the better this will help us in order to move into a resolution. The second management measure is that there is, as you mentioned also, Harry, there is a huge mistrust between the parties in this conflict. So we need to begin first with some confidence building measures in order to develop the trust between the two parties, the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis, in order to be able to also position the conflict better for a resolution. Confidence building measures do not resolve conflicts, they just help us change the dynamics, because whenever mistrust is in control, then we cannot talk about resolutions. Number three, we need to work on better or developing better relationships, first from within the parties themselves, meaning between governments and public opinion and the people. Public opinion on both sides, by the way, has been a hindrance to resolution over the past years. So we need to work on preparing the public for a resolution and for making concessions and compromises on this conflict in order to be able to deal with the resolution later on. Both sides are highly polarized, and public opinion here is playing as, or has been playing as, a hindrance to resolution over the past decades. So for that, I think this needs to be addressed. Another major factor on the management side as well is that it's not only the relationships from within, but also the relationship particularly between Armenia and Turkey. Right? There is a historical animosity between the two sides. There is a very painful history between the two sides, and this also has not been helpful in order to produce better outcome and better management of this conflict. So the better that we can manage on this level, I think this will also help us provide or prepare for dealing or addressing a resolution later. Number four, in this management aspect is also, which is a missed opportunity that we didn't do over the past 27 years since this conflict ended, the war ended, which is also addressing some incentives, the economic factor. Probably even small economic projects, enterprises between the people on the two sides, which is similar, by the way, to what North Korea and South Korea have in the demilitarized zones between the two parties. So these small industrial economic projects that benefit the individuals could help in defeating or battling mistrust and developing some trust, which also has been, as I said, a missed opportunity in the past, which is something we can benefit from. Now, this takes us to the important issue about the current war and whether this war, the war is terrible, the war is bad for both sides, but did it really contribute to the mutually hurting stalemate in order, according to the conflict resolution literature, this helps in producing, preparing for a resolution. Though it's a horrible war, I think it's we can use this also as an opportunity to push for a resolution on two levels. One is that now that it seems that Azerbaijan is making some progress, I think this is helping in order to restore the national dignity of the Azerbaijanis, because this was because of the result of the 1994 war, that it was a bad defeat, a humiliating defeat for the Azerbaijanis in 1994. So here you have the Azerbaijanis liberating some parts of their lands, with their army, and making progress. So this is restoring the national pride, which is helping for them is to engage better in the conflict. And the second factor that this war also helps us with is that also restored some sort of a balance of power that also helps in producing or in helping preparing for the resolution on that level. Now, moving more or deeper into the resolution, there are major principles that we have to keep in mind. Military occupation by force, it's not sustainable. It's against international law. This must end. Second, refugees on both sides needs to be addressed because this is a humanitarian issue. It has to be addressed and it has to be resolved. Self-determination is another major important principle that we have to keep in mind as well. And it's important for us for a resolution. And here, Armenians will never become Azerbaijanis and vice versa. Yeah. And whenever we have a clash of identity or a clash of recognition, or actually a clash of needs for recognition on both sides, this can and it should be negotiated between both sides in order to recognize the identity and the recognition of identity and be satisfied comfortably for both sides. And this can come through negotiation and dialogue on both sides. There has to be, takes me to dialogue and a peace process. In the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we used to always say there is a process with the peace process there. There is a process without peace. But here, unfortunately, there is a peace process that has no peace and no process, by the way, because the Minsk group has done nothing since 1994, the war ended. So this framework for a resolution, a mediation, this must be addressed. This needs to be changed. There is a gradual approach also that can be take for a resolution. We can't solve everything all at once, but we can begin gradually. Gradually, and also helps with the confidence building measures. But there is a very important condition for gradual approach that also we learn from the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There has to be gradual, but there can be no changes on the ground while we're doing gradual admissions. Because in the Israel-Palestine, we went through the gradual approach. Israel continued to build settlements, but then undermined the whole process. And finally, I end is that the Minsk group, because it hasn't been helpful, I think Russia, we know that Russia holds the keys, and Russia is the most influential part. I think we can capitalize on this. We have alternative dispute resolution measures. I think we can also involve Turkey along with Russia. We saw this in the Astana group working in Syria. It worked to a certain extent in Libya. And I think we have a model here probably we can contemplate, because the Minsk approach is not sustainable. And thank you.
Dr. Fraihat, this was wonderful. I so wish that I had another 15 minutes for us to engage in a question and answer conversation. We leave that for another occasion. I'm not going to offer you a position as consultant with the OSCE Minsk group. I think you earn more money where you are, and your work is far more important and beneficial where you are, educating the younger generations of the Arab world. So thank you very much. I will share this with colleagues and friends, and I hope we will have the opportunity to do a part 2 soon again.
Thank you, Harry. It has been a pleasure, and thank you for this great opportunity. Bye.